Michelangelo Merisi de Caravaggio, sometimes referred to as Fra Michelangelo, because he was inducted as a brother in the Knights of St. John, this religious holy order based in Malta in 1607. But most people, including historians later on, would simply call him Caravaggio. A man of great controversy both on and off of the canvas, he inspired his own stylistic way of artistry, known as Caravaggisti, inspiring numerous pupils and admirers of his work alike in the newly founding Baroque period of art history. This video is going to go through his highest greats and his lowest ebbs, with a smattering of masterpieces thrown in between, including his greatest work, the beheading of St. John the Baptist, located in the oratory of St. John's Co-Cathedral in the city of Valletta on Malta. Without any metaphorical or pretentious hearsay. So, let's get on with the introduction and go from there. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to you all. From those down the road to the folks around the world. Welcome back to another video looking at the artist's life known as Caravaggio. Let's get straight on it. Caravaggio was born in Milan in 1571, but aged just 5 years old, he moved with his family to the small provincial town some 22 miles east of the great city called Caravaggio. His father was a decorator, architect, and household administrator for the Marquis of Caravaggio. But just a year after moving to this small provincial town, both Caravaggio's father and his grandfather were to die of the plague, leaving he and his 4 siblings to be raised by his mother, and unfortunately his childhood was in poverty. At the age of 13 in 1584, Caravaggio was to lose his mother as well, but he landed on his feet working as an apprentice for the Milanese artist known as Simone Pietrosano, who professed himself to be a pupil to the great Renaissance artist Titian. The apprenticeship would have only lasted about 4 years, and there is very little detail, rather obscure details, as to what life was like for Caravaggio between the end of that apprenticeship and him arriving in Rome in his early 20s, in the early 1590s. But there is some suggestion that he ended up in Venice for a brief period of time, admiring the works of Venetian artists of the Renaissance period like Giorgione and Titian as well. There are aspects, apparently, according to art historians, that suggest that early works by Caravaggio have a slight Venetian style of art to them, comparative to the Milanese style that he was being taught by Simone Pietrosano. When we do find Caravaggio in Rome, he doesn't become the eminent artist overnight like we see him in his later years. It is said, rather falsely, that he arrived in Rome with no home to go to, no fixed address for the longest time, next to no money, and rags for clothes. Now this is probably all speculative and falsehood wrapped up in defamation, because some people really didn't like Caravaggio, especially for the fact that he found himself in a numerous number of brawls, fights, and criminal charges. But what we do know of Caravaggio's arrival in 1592 is that over the course of the next 3 years, He would move from address to address, never keeping the same one from one month to the next. It's said that he moved up to 10 times in just this 3-year period. He would work for other eminent artists of papal and Roman origin before quarrelling with them and going out on his own way. He would have some high-end clients, which he would have throughout his mid to late 20s, which tended to focus more on still lifes and other smaller works, smaller portraits as well. But it was in 1599 when things began to change for Caravaggio. He was asked by the San Luigi dei Francesi Church to do 3 works of the life of St. Matthew for their Contrarelli chapel. These 3 works were considered a sensation by the Roman populace and general art critics alike. And Caravaggio's prospects of an artist flew through the roof. He became increasingly popular, with requests and commissions coming through his door on a constant basis. The painters then in Rome were greatly taken by this novelty, and the young ones particularly gathered around him, praised him as the unique imitator of nature, and looked at his work as a miracle. Caravaggio flew the flag of popularity for another 6 years in Rome before he was arrested, charged with murder, and sentenced to death. Now, this was not the first time that Caravaggio had been in trouble with the law and spent time in a prison cell. He had been sued for defamation a couple of times, but was mostly known for having a bit of a bad temper and getting into fights and brawls on the streets, not just in Rome, but in Milan as well. And usually Caravaggio's clients were very good at assisting him getting out of this bind, or maybe reducing the sentence. But this is murder, and murder is a much more severe thing. And the person that was murdered, Ranuccio Tommasino, was from an incredibly wealthy, incredibly influential family. There was no getting away with this crime for Caravaggio. But the catalyst that led to an eventual murder is rather unclear. There are numerous different vague details that we're getting. Some suggest that it was a gambling debt that Caravaggio had not yet paid. Some say that it was a quarrel over a game of rackets, an early form of tennis. Some suggest that it was a political discussion that went wrong and murderous. The Tommasino family were very Spanish-leaning in their political alliances, whereas Caravaggio tended to be more French, despite the fact that his hometown of Milan had been run and ruled by the Spanish kings since the early 1500s. But then there is the suggestion that Ranuccio Tommasino was a pimp who had numerous prostitutes across Rome, one of which was being used by Caravaggio as a model for his paintings. A quarrel struck between the 2 individuals, and murder was the answer. Now, whether these quarrels turned into a brawl on the streets of Rome, or whether it was a fully fledged duel of swords, Caravaggio made the striking blow, stabbing Ranuccio Tommasino and killing him instantly. It is likely that Caravaggio never intended to commit murder. Yes, he'd been in trouble with the law on numerous charges for brawling and fighting and spent time in prison, but none of them were the intent to actually murder anyone. And likely on this occasion as well, there was never the intent of murder. This was just a brawl or a duel that had turned deadly. Caravaggio was charged with murder and sentenced to death. He tried to put in for a pardon from the Roman authorities, but they were denied. The crime still stood, as did the sentence. And so a desperate Caravaggio fled south towards the Kingdom of Naples, where the Roman authority had next to no jurisdiction. He came into the protection and the patronage of Constanza of the Colonna family. Constanza had been married to Francesco Sforza, who was based up in Milan, and Caravaggio and his family had great connections with both the Colonna and Sforza families for many years. Under the protection of Constanza Colonna, Caravaggio was able to get safe passage towards Sicily, and then further still to the island of Malta, where Constanza's son, Fabrizio, was a knight of the Order of St. John. The new Grand Master to the Knights of St. John, Alof de Wignacourt, was incredibly pleased to have the eminent Caravaggio here on the island of Malta. Alof de Wignacourt was incredibly keen to stress the artistic preservation that was fledgling within Malta at this time. Wignacourt commissioned immediately a painting of himself and a small page depicting him from a time when he took part as a young knight during the Great Siege of Malta in 1565. He also immediately inducted Caravaggio into the Knights of St. John, into this religious holy order. He made Caravaggio the lowest grade of knight that you could get, but it was a knight nonetheless. Caravaggio himself hoped that by being a Knight of St. John and by having all these friends from this holy order, including the Grand Master himself, would put him in good stead to have and petition a pardon to the Roman authorities. Caravaggio would do other portraits for various high-ranking knights, including this one of Fra Antonio Martelli, which had been mistaken for another portrait of Alof de Wignacourt. But it wasn't just portraits that Caravaggio was asked to do. He does an excellent depiction of St. Jerome writing, and he does another picture of St. John the Baptist drinking from a spring. But it is his masterpiece, the beheading of St. John the Baptist, that hangs larger than life within the oratory of St. John's Co-Cathedral in the Maltese capital of Valletta, that is most profound and most recognized within Caravaggio's artistic portfolio. But just a year after arriving in Malta, finding its solace, becoming a knight, and finding success amongst the Knights of St. John, he would once again find himself in a prison cell in the August of 1608. But this wasn't just an ordinary prison cell. This was what the Maltese would call a guva, an underground prison cell which can only be accessed through a trap door in the floor. He was held in Fort St. Angelo in this guva in the city of Bergu. Although the crime was unrecorded, it is said that Caravaggio once again found himself in a brawl with other Knights of St. John, injuring numerous members, including one who was of a very high rank in the order. Caravaggio didn't wait for his trial, and thankfully still had his friend Fabrizio Sforza Colonna to help him escape from his prison. Under the cover of darkness, Caravaggio left the island of Malta and sailed off towards the Kingdom of Sicily. On the 1st of December 1608, Caravaggio was officially expelled from the Knights of St. John, who declared him, as they did whenever anyone was expelled from the order, a foul and rotten person. Now, believe this what you will, but it is said that Caravaggio did feel slightly guilty for what he had done to the Knights of St. John and the turmoil that he had put them through, especially since the good grace and hospitality that the Knights had shown him when he arrived in 1607, escaping another crime. Caravaggio is said to have painted a picture for delivery to the Grand Master Alof de Vignacourt. But whilst the painting may have been received, the apology that was attached with it was not that well respected. Over the course of the next 2 years, Caravaggio would spend time in Palermo, Messina, as part of the Kingdom of Sicily and the clientele there, before making his way back to the Kingdom of Naples, where in the summer of 1610 he would hear encouraging news coming out of Rome, which may mean that a pardon could be on the way. So Caravaggio headed north to Port Hercule, which is on the southern border of the Tuscany region. And so it is at Port Hercule on the 18th of July 1610 that Caravaggio died. But as to the nature of his death and what caused it, well, that's up for debate. Contemporary sources suggest that the Tommasino family, or representatives from the Knights of St. John, had hunted him down and murdered him. Some sources from the Vatican do support this theory of Caravaggio being murdered by representatives of the Tommasino family. It is unlikely that he was murdered by representatives from the Knights of St. John, because he had certain clients within the Kingdom of Sicily that were also affiliated with the Knights on Malta. Plus, no warrant was ever actually given for his arrest. Then there was the official line that was given after Caravaggio's death, which suggests that he died of a type of fever, which modern historians tend to agree with more than the murder. Some historians have suggested possibly syphilis or malaria, or maybe a Mediterranean fever as well, as to the cause of Caravaggio's death. Scientific DNA testing possibly suggests that lead poisoning could have been the way in which Caravaggio died. An artistic career using lead-based paints could have slowly killed him over his entire career. Then there's the suggestion more recently that sepsis from an old sustained injury from about a year before could have been the reason for Caravaggio's sad passing. Now, the year previous, Caravaggio found himself in a tavern in the Kingdom of Naples, frequented by a number of unscrupulous cutthroat individuals. He found himself in yet another brawl, to which he sustained numerous injuries to his face and causing large amounts of disfigurement. Perhaps this injury is what caused the fever a year later, or a few months later I should say, which of course ended up killing him. Michelangelo Merisi de Caravaggio, a man who was controversial both on and off of the canvas, an artist from Milan, applauded in Rome and beloved in Malta. A criminal, a terrible individual, and likely a very unpleasant person to be around. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that it has been interesting enough, and I hope to see you in the next video.